Hello, and welcome to Sleep Stories World. I'd like to invite you to step into a world of relaxation and tranquility with this bedtime story, designed to help you unwind and de-stress. Listening to this story will allow you to escape the hustle and bustle of daily life and find solace in a peaceful environment in the comfort of your own space. By engaging in this story, you can embark on a journey that nurtures and soothes your mind and rejuvenates your body, promoting overall well-being and inner harmony through sound, restful sleep. Allow yourself the opportunity to unwind, recharge, and reconnect with yourself on a profound level. Before we begin, let's prepare your space for rest. I'd like you to aim to sleep somewhere that is comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything in your environment, please do so now. Your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, whatever will help you feel most comfortable. When you're ready, lie down where you will be sleeping. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket, as your body temperature will decrease slightly as you start to relax. Let yourself settle into your bed, feel the weight of your body being supported, notice how your mattress rises to meet you. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Nothing you need to watch or observe. Your only task now is to be here, in this moment, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose, and exhale slowly through your mouth. Take another deep breath, and this time feel your chest expand as the air fills your lungs. Notice the sensation of your ribcage opening. Breathe out, and feel your chest deflate. Feel your body sinking a little deeper into your bed. In. And out. In. And out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. That it's time to let go of the day. Now, empty your mind, and imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, like the soft glow of evening sun filtering through leaves, or candlelight dancing in a peaceful room. This is your light, and it carries with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your lungs. Imagine it glowing softly inside your chest. As you breathe out, imagine the light spreading gently around your chest, expanding with a soft radiance. Breathe in, and let the light expand a little further this time. Feel it growing warmer, more present. Breathe out, and let the light travel up to your neck and down past your diaphragm. It moves slowly, like honey, coating everything with warmth and ease. Breathe in, and swallow even more of this warm, vibrant light. Breathe out, and let it fill your head, your throat, your chest, your stomach. Every space within you is now glowing softly. Breathe in deeply, and fill your entire upper body with this warm, vibrant light. Your shoulders, your arms, your back, your chest, all bathed in gentle, peaceful light. Take a few more breaths now, and with each one, allow this warm, vibrant energy to intensify in your upper body. Not in an overwhelming way, but like turning up the dimmer switch just slightly. More warmth, more comfort, more peace. Think of nothing but this warm, vibrant light. If a thought comes by, perhaps something from your day, or a task for tomorrow, allow yourself to acknowledge its presence. Notice it, like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream. And then, let it drift away. Dismiss it kindly, and refocus on the light. There will be time for those thoughts later. But not now. Now is for rest. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Nothing to do. Nowhere to be. Just breathing. Just light. Just peace. On your next breath in, let the warm, vibrant light begin to travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, moving slowly and deliberately, like a warm wave washing over you. Breathe out, and allow the light to reach your knees. Feel the warmth spreading down your legs. Breathe in, and feel the light continue its gentle journey. Breathe out, and sense it flowing down your shins, to your ankles. Breathe in deeply, and let the light fill your legs all the way down to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Breathe out, and feel your entire body relaxing more deeply than before. Breathe in, and draw in even more tranquility. Out, releasing any remaining tension. Focus now on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. Nothing but your breath and the light. In and out. Glowing and peaceful. If your mind wanders, that's perfectly natural. Simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light, to this present moment. Relax. Let go. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind knows how to release. And tonight, you're giving yourself permission to do both. There's nothing you need to figure out, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to remember right now. Just breathe, and listen, and drift. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail or remember every word. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey toward sleep. And now, let us begin. Tonight, we journey to one of the most extraordinary places on our planet. The Arctic, a realm of ice and silence at the very top of the world. Imagine standing at the North Pole in the depths of winter. Around you stretches an endless expanse of white, a frozen ocean covered in sheets of ice that shift and crack and whisper in the cold. The air is still, so still that you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots. This is not land beneath your feet. Unlike its southern counterpart Antarctica, which sits atop a massive continent, the North Pole has no solid ground at all. What appears to be a vast frozen landscape is actually ice, floating atop the deep, dark Arctic Ocean. The ice beneath you is part of the polar ice cap, drifting slowly with ocean currents, never truly still, always in gentle motion. It's a sea that has turned solid, a liquid world transformed into something you can walk upon. And yet, far below, hundreds of meters down, the ocean continues its ancient rhythms, dark and cold and full of life. The temperature here, in the heart of winter, can plunge to 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and stay there for days, or even weeks. The cold is not just something you feel, it's something that seems to have substance, something that presses against your skin, fills your lungs, surrounds you completely. At -40 degrees, the air becomes almost crystalline. Your breath turns to mist immediately, freezing into tiny ice crystals that sparkle in whatever faint light exists. Even the moisture in your nostrils begins to freeze with each inhale, a strange, prickling sensation. But here's something remarkable about the North Pole, something that might surprise you. Despite its location at the northernmost point of Earth, despite being the very crown of our planet, the North Pole is not actually the coldest place in the Northern Hemisphere. The reason lies beneath your feet. The Arctic Ocean, even when covered by this thick polar ice pack, continues to hold warmth from the summer months. The water beneath the ice remains at a temperature of around -2 degrees Celsius, cold, yes, but warmer than the air above. This relatively warmer water radiates heat upward through the ice, helping to moderate the extreme cold and keeping winter temperatures at the North Pole around -30 to -35 degrees Celsius, rather than the even more brutal cold found inland on continents like Siberia or northern Canada. At this time of year, in the heart of Arctic winter, something extraordinary happens, something that transforms this already alien landscape into something even more otherworldly. The sun, that constant companion that rises and sets each day for most of the world, simply vanishes. Around September 21st, on the autumnal equinox, the sun touches the horizon for the last time and begins to slip away. It sinks lower and lower each day, until finally, it disappears completely. And then it stays gone. For 6 months, from late September until late March, the sun remains below the horizon. It does not rise. Day does not come. This is the polar night, a time when day and night lose their meaning, and the Arctic slips into a long, peaceful sleep beneath a blanket of darkness. In the beginning, there is still some light. For a few hours each day, a soft twilight illuminates the horizon, a gentle blue glow that tells you the sun is still there, just out of sight, waiting on the other side of the world. But as winter deepens, even this twilight fades. By late December, the darkness is complete. The world exists in a state of perpetual night, a deep, velvety darkness that blankets everything. And yet, this darkness is not empty. It is not lifeless. It is full of subtle gradations, shades of black and blue and deep purple. The ice reflects whatever faint light exists, from the stars, from the moon when it rises. Sometimes the darkness is so complete that you cannot see your hand in front of your face. Other times, when the moon is full and the sky is clear, the world is bathed in a soft, silvery glow that makes the ice appear luminous, almost magical. In this darkness, the ice continues its ancient dance. The sea ice here is relatively thin compared to the massive ice sheets of Antarctica, generally less than about 4 meters thick in most places. But what it lacks in depth, it makes up for in movement. This ice is not static, not frozen in place. It drifts with ocean currents that flow beneath, with winds that push and pull from above. The ice moves slowly, perhaps a few kilometers each day, but it moves constantly, creating a landscape that is forever changing. Sheets of ice press against one another, grinding and pushing, creating pressure ridges that jet upward like frozen mountain ranges in miniature. Some of these ridges can rise 10 or 15 meters above the surrounding ice, small mountains born from the collision of frozen plates. In other places, the ice pulls apart, creating leads, narrow channels of dark, steaming water that cut through the white landscape like dark veins. These leads can be just a few meters wide, or they can stretch for hundreds of meters, temporary rivers of liquid water in a frozen world. The water in these leads is warmer than the air around them, and so they steam and smoke, creating ghostly wisps of vapor that drift across the ice. The ice speaks, constantly. If you stand still and listen, you can hear it. Sometimes the sounds are gentle, a soft creaking and groaning, like an old wooden ship at sea. The ice settling, adjusting, responding to the pressures around it. Other times, the sounds are more dramatic, deep booms that echo across the emptiness as massive sheets collide and buckle. These sounds can travel for kilometers across the frozen plain, announcing the ice's movements to anyone, or anything, within range. There are sharp cracks too, sudden and startling, the sound of ice breaking, of leads opening, of the frozen surface yielding to forces too great to resist. And beneath it all, a constant background whisper, the sound of snow crystals settling, of wind moving across the surface, of the ice breathing. This is the Arctic in winter, a world reduced to its most essential elements: ice and water, darkness and cold, silence and wind. It is a place that seems, at first glance, to be hostile to life, too harsh, too extreme, too unforgiving. And yet, life persists here. Life thrives here. In ways that seem almost impossible, creatures have adapted to call this frozen realm home. They have found ways not just to survive, but to flourish in conditions that would be fatal to most living things on Earth. As we continue our journey through this Arctic night, we will meet some of these remarkable inhabitants. We will discover how they endure the cold, the darkness, the endless winter. We will learn their secrets, the adaptations and behaviors that allow them to not just exist, but to thrive in one of the most challenging environments our planet has to offer. But for now, let yourself simply rest in this frozen landscape. Imagine the vast stillness, the peaceful darkness, the gentle movement of ice beneath an endless sky. There is something deeply calming about this place, something that reminds us that even in the harshest environments, there is beauty, there is balance, there is a kind of peace. Let the Arctic winter wrap around you. Let its quiet seep into your thoughts. Let its darkness become a gentle companion as you drift. And now, we meet the true ruler of this frozen realm, the polar bear. Imagine, if you will, a massive bear padding silently across the ice. Its fur is thick and white, blending perfectly with the snow around it. From a distance, it might appear as nothing more than a shadow, a movement barely perceived against the endless white. Up close, you would see that this bear is enormous, truly enormous. Adult male polar bears can stand more than 11 feet tall when they rise on their hind legs, and they can weigh over 1,700 pounds. They are the largest land predators on Earth, walking monuments to survival in the harshest conditions imaginable. But here's something remarkable about these bears. Despite their size, despite the word polar in their name, they are not truly land animals at all. Scientists classify polar bears as marine mammals, creatures of the sea. Their scientific name, Ursus maritimus, literally means sea bear. This classification reflects a deep truth about polar bears. They do not simply live near the ocean, they are part of it. They spend much of their lives on the sea ice, hunting, traveling, even sleeping on this frozen platform that floats atop the Arctic Ocean. They are exceptional swimmers, moving through the icy water with grace and power. They can swim for hours, even days, covering distances of over 40 miles in open water when necessary. The water here is cold beyond imagining, hovering just above the freezing point of salt water. Yet the polar bear is perfectly adapted to it. When a polar bear swims, it uses its massive front paws like paddles, propelling itself through the water. Its hind legs trail behind, acting as rudders to help it steer. It can even dive beneath the surface, staying underwater for up to 2 minutes as it hunts or explores. While submerged, its ears flatten against its head, and its nostrils close tight, but its eyes remain open, scanning the underwater world. The bear's thick fur provides remarkable insulation. Each individual hair is actually hollow, a tiny air-filled tube that traps heat close to the skin. The hairs are also transparent, not white. They appear white because they scatter and reflect light in all directions. Beneath this extraordinary coat lies black skin, which absorbs what little sunlight filters through the fur. And beneath the skin lies a layer of fat, of blubber, that can measure up to 11 centimeters thick. This fat layer is essential, providing both warmth and energy reserves. In winter, when the ice extends its reach far across the Arctic Ocean, polar bears are in their element. This is their prime hunting season, the time when they are most active and most successful. Unlike their brown bear cousins, polar bears do not hibernate during winter. Male bears and non-pregnant females remain active hunters throughout the long, dark months, traveling across the ice in search of food. The polar bear's favorite prey is the ringed seal, a small marine mammal that lives beneath the ice. Seals are rich in blubber, in fat, exactly what a polar bear needs to survive. A single seal can provide enough energy to sustain a bear for several days. But catching a seal is no easy task. Polar bears must be patient, incredibly patient. Seals create breathing holes in the ice, using their sharp claws to carve openings that allow them to surface for air. A seal might use as many as 12 different breathing holes in a given area as it hunts for fish and crustaceans beneath the ice. The polar bear's hunting technique is elegantly simple but requires extraordinary stillness. It finds a breathing hole and waits. And waits. And waits. Polar bears have been observed remaining motionless beside a seal's breathing hole for up to 14 hours. 14 hours of absolute stillness in temperatures far below freezing. The bear doesn't move, doesn't shift, barely breathes. It simply waits, every sense focused on that small hole in the ice. When the seal finally surfaces, pushing its nose through the hole for a breath of air, the waiting bear springs into action. In an instant, it lunges forward, using its powerful jaws to grab the seal's head. The hunt is over in seconds. After hours of patient waiting, the moment of action is almost too quick to see. But not all hunts are successful. In fact, fewer than 15% of a polar bear's hunting attempts result in a meal. This means that for every successful hunt, a bear might wait at 8 or 9 breathing holes without catching anything. Patience is not just a virtue for polar bears, it's a necessity for survival. Sometimes, polar bears use a different technique. They stalk seals that are resting on the ice surface. This requires a different kind of patience, a different kind of skill. Seals that hole out onto the ice are extremely vigilant. They stay close to the water, ready to dive in at the first sign of danger. While resting, a seal will wake from its nap every 20 to 30 seconds, raising its head to look around, scanning for predators. Then it lowers its head and sleeps for a few more moments before checking again. The polar bear must time its approach perfectly. Each time the seal drops its head to rest, the bear inches forward, slowly, carefully, silently. The instant the seal raises its head, the bear freezes, becoming as still as the ice itself. Forward, freeze, forward, freeze. This stalking hunt can take an hour or more, the bear covering hundreds of meters one careful step at a time. When food is plentiful, a polar bear will often eat only the seal's blubber, the fat-rich layer that provides the most energy. The rest of the carcass might be left behind, where Arctic foxes, ravens, and gulls will scavenge the remains. During winter, Arctic foxes often follow polar bears across the ice, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles in the bear's wake. These smaller predators are completely dependent on the leftovers from polar bear kills for their winter survival. They must learn to keep a respectful distance, though, occasionally, a bear will kill a fox that ventures too close to its meal. After feeding, polar bears are meticulous about cleaning themselves. They head for open water or clean snow and spend up to 15 minutes washing off, licking their paws, their chests, their muzzles. This cleanliness is not just about hygiene, it's about survival. Matted, dirty, wet fur loses its insulating properties. To stay warm in the Arctic, a polar bear must keep its fur clean and dry. When polar bears are not hunting, they are often resting. From July through December, when ice conditions make seal hunting difficult or impossible, a polar bear might spend up to 87% of its time resting, conserving energy for when food becomes available again. In winter, they sleep in shallow pits they dig in the snow, positioning themselves with their sides or backs to the wind. They can sleep right through blizzards, with snow piling up on top of them like an insulating blanket, creating a protective cocoon. Sometimes they remain curled up under the snow for several days, waiting patiently for a storm to pass. When the weather clears, they simply shake off the accumulated snow and resume their travels across the ice. As long as a polar bear is not exposed to strong winds, its body can maintain normal temperature and metabolic function even in temperatures of -37 degrees Celsius, -35 degrees Fahrenheit. Their bodies are engineering marvels, designed through countless generations to thrive in conditions that would kill most other creatures within hours. But despite all these remarkable adaptations, life is not easy for polar bears. Their entire existence revolves around hunting, eating, and conserving energy. The Arctic winter, with its extended ice cover, provides the best opportunities for successful hunts. It is during these cold, dark months that polar bears do most of their feeding, building up the fat reserves that will sustain them through leaner times. As we watch this polar bear moving across the ice in the darkness, there is something deeply peaceful about its presence. It moves with purpose but without hurry, a creature perfectly at home in this frozen world. It is patient, resilient, adapted to its environment in ways that seem almost miraculous. Let yourself imagine the quiet strength of this animal, the way it waits without restlessness, the way it accepts the cold and the darkness as simply the conditions of its life. There is something we can learn from the polar bear, about patience, about adaptation, about finding peace in challenging circumstances. Let the image of the polar bear settle in your mind, this magnificent creature moving silently across the frozen sea, and let that image carry you gently forward, deeper into rest, deeper into peace. In the darkness of the Arctic winter, on certain nights when the sky is clear and the stars shine bright, something magical begins to happen. At first, you might notice nothing more than a faint glow on the horizon, a whisper of pale green or ghostly white against the velvet darkness. It's subtle, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the glow begins to brighten. It spreads across the sky like watercolor bleeding across wet paper. And then, it begins to move. This is the aurora borealis, the northern lights, one of the most spectacular natural phenomena on Earth. The story of the aurora begins not here on Earth, but 93 million miles away, on the surface of the Sun. The Sun is not the calm, steady sphere it appears to be from our distant vantage point. It is a roiling, churning ball of superhot gases, a cosmic furnace of unimaginable power. Its surface temperature reaches about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and within its core, the temperature soars to an astonishing 27 million degrees. From this turbulent surface, the Sun continuously releases a stream of charged particles, electrons and protons, that flow outward into space in all directions. Scientists call this the solar wind. It moves through the solar system at extraordinary speeds, traveling at roughly 1 million miles per hour. Even at this incredible velocity, it takes these particles about 2 to 3 days to travel from the Sun to Earth. When this solar wind reaches our planet, it encounters Earth's magnetic field, an invisible shield that surrounds and protects us. This magnetic field is generated deep within Earth's core, where molten iron flows and churns, creating powerful magnetic forces. Without this protective shield, the solar wind would strip away our atmosphere, making life on Earth impossible. Most of the solar wind is deflected by this magnetic barrier, forced to flow around Earth like water flowing around a rock in a stream. But some particles, particularly during strong solar activity, become trapped in the magnetic field. They are funneled toward Earth's magnetic poles, guided along invisible magnetic field lines like beads sliding along a string. These particles then collide with atoms and molecules in Earth's upper atmosphere, in a region called the thermosphere, approximately 100 kilometers above the ground. That's about 62 miles up, far higher than any clouds, far higher than any commercial aircraft flies. The air there is incredibly thin, but it's still dense enough for these cosmic collisions to create something extraordinary. When a charged particle from the Sun strikes an atom of oxygen or nitrogen in our atmosphere, it transfers energy to that atom. The atom becomes excited, elevated to a higher energy state. But atoms don't like to stay in this excited state. They want to return to normal. And when they do, they release that extra energy as light. Tiny specks of light. Millions upon millions of them. And together, these countless points of light create the shimmering curtains and dancing ribbons we call the aurora. The color of the aurora depends on which type of gas is struck and at what altitude the collision occurs. Oxygen, when excited at altitudes between 60 and 120 miles up, produces the most common auroral color, a luminous green. This is the color you see most often in photographs of the northern lights, that distinctive, ethereal green glow. Higher up, above 120 miles, oxygen produces a different color entirely, red. These red auroras are less common and often fainter, but when they appear, they can paint the upper sky with deep crimson hues. Nitrogen creates different colors depending on its energy level and the type of particle that strikes it. At altitudes between 60 and 120 miles, excited nitrogen glows blue. Below about 60 miles, at the lower edges of an aurora, nitrogen can produce shades of pink and reddish purple. Sometimes these colors blend and mix, creating auroras that appear purple, or even white when multiple colors combine. The colors reveal secrets about the aurora, about where the light was created and what atoms and molecules produced it. Each aurora is like a cosmic painting, and the colors are clues to the invisible processes happening high above our heads. The aurora is not still. It moves, it dances, it pulses with life. Curtains of light unfurl across the sky, rippling and swaying as if moved by some celestial wind. Bands of color arc from horizon to horizon, brightening and fading in waves. Sometimes the lights spiral into vortexes, sometimes they shoot across the sky like searchlight beams, sometimes they shimmer and flicker like flames. An aurora can last for just a few minutes before fading away, vanishing as mysteriously as it appeared. Or it might dance for 15 to 30 minutes before quieting. On rare, special nights, the display can continue for hours, with wave after wave of light washing across the darkness. The intensity and frequency of auroras depend on the sun's activity. When solar eruptions called coronal mass ejections occur on the sun's surface, huge quantities of charged particles are hurled into space. When these clouds of particles reach Earth, they can trigger particularly dramatic auroral displays, storms of light that can be seen much farther from the poles than usual. There's also a curious pattern to auroral activity throughout the year. The brightest and most frequent displays tend to occur around the equinoxes, in late March and late September. Scientists call this the equinoctial effect. The exact reasons are still being studied, but it appears to be related to the favorable alignment of Earth's magnetic field with the solar wind during these times, making geomagnetic storms more likely to develop. Throughout history, humans have watched the aurora with wonder and created stories to explain its presence. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia have many names for the lights. One of these names is Guosahas, which means the light which can be heard. For generations, people have reported hearing sounds during auroral displays, soft crackling, popping, or rustling noises. For a long time, scientists dismissed these reports as imagination or psychological phenomena. But recent research has discovered that these sounds might actually be real. Researchers at Aalto University in Finland have measured popping and crackling sounds during auroras. They believe the sounds occur when a layer of warm air forms about 80 meters above the ground on calm winter nights. This atmospheric inversion layer can allow static electricity to accumulate during a geomagnetic storm. When that electricity discharges, it creates audible sounds that can be heard from the ground below. In Finland, there's a beautiful folk tale about the aurora. The Finnish name for the northern lights is revuntulet, which translates to fox fires. According to legend, the lights are caused by a magical fox running across the Arctic fells, sweeping his tail across the snow and sending sparks flying up into the sky. It's a charming story, one that captures the playful, dancing nature of the lights. The Vikings had their own interpretation. They believed the aurora was the armor and shields of the Valkyries, the warrior maidens who chose which soldiers would die in battle and be carried to Valhalla. As these celestial warriors rode across the sky on their horses, their armor would catch the light and shimmer, creating the dancing lights people saw. The name aurora borealis itself comes from ancient Rome and Greece. Aurora was the Roman goddess of the dawn, and Boreas was the Greek god of the north wind. Together, the name means northern dawn, because to people living far south of the Arctic Circle, the aurora often appeared as a faint reddish glow to the north, resembling the reddish glow in the east at sunrise. Today, even though we understand the science behind the aurora, even though we know it's caused by solar particles and magnetic fields and atmospheric gases, the experience of watching the northern lights remains profound. There's something deeply moving about standing beneath those dancing curtains of color, knowing you're witnessing the visible connection between Earth and the Sun, seeing energy that traveled millions of miles through the vacuum of space, only to create this fleeting beauty in our atmosphere. The aurora reminds us that we live on a planet that is part of a larger cosmic system. The light dancing above the Arctic is proof that we are not isolated, that energy and matter flow through space, connecting our world to the sun and beyond. And yet, for all its cosmic scale, the aurora feels intimate, personal, like a gift meant just for those who take the time to look up into the darkness and watch. As we continue our journey through the Arctic winter, let the image of the aurora settle into your mind. Those shimmering curtains of green and purple and red, moving slowly across the star-filled sky, reflecting off the ice below, illuminating the frozen landscape with otherworldly light. Let the aurora's gentle movement lull you. Let its colors wash over you. Let the peace of watching this ancient, eternal dance carry you deeper into rest. As the aurora fades and darkness settles once more over the frozen landscape, another creature moves through the Arctic winter, one much smaller than the polar bear, but no less remarkable in its ability to survive. The Arctic fox. Imagine a small, compact animal, no larger than a house cat, padding silently across the snow. Its fur is so white, so pure, that it seems to glow faintly in the darkness. Against the snow and ice, it's nearly invisible, a ghost moving through a ghost world. Only its dark eyes and the black tip of its nose give it away. The Arctic fox is quite small compared to the other predators of the north. A fully grown adult is only about 50 to 60 centimeters long, roughly 20 to 24 inches, not including its magnificent tail, which adds another 30 centimeters. An adult fox weighs just 3 to 8 kilograms, about 7 to 17 pounds. In human terms, it's roughly the weight of a small house cat or a small dog. And yet, this tiny creature survives in the same brutal conditions that challenge even the mighty polar bear. The secret to the Arctic fox's survival lies in its remarkable adaptations. Its body is designed, down to the smallest detail, for life in the extreme cold. Unlike other fox species that live in warmer climates, the Arctic fox has proportionally shorter legs, a shorter neck, and smaller ears. This compact body shape gives it a relatively low surface area compared to its volume, which means less of its body is exposed to the frigid air, and less heat is lost to the environment. But the Arctic fox's most impressive adaptation is its fur. The coat of an Arctic fox provides the best insulation of any mammal on Earth. Let that sink in for a moment. Of all the furry creatures in the world, from bears to bison to mountain goats, the Arctic fox has the warmest coat. Its winter fur is incredibly thick and consists of multiple layers that trap air close to the skin. This trapped air acts as insulation, keeping the fox's body temperature at a cozy 38 degrees Celsius, about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the world around it is dozens of degrees below freezing. The fox is so well insulated that it doesn't even begin to shiver until the temperature drops to negative 70 degrees Celsius, that's negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Most mammals would be long dead at such temperatures, but the Arctic fox merely finds it mildly uncomfortable. Even the fox's paws are covered in thick fur, a feature unique among canines. This fur serves two purposes. First, it insulates the paws from the frozen ground, allowing the fox to walk comfortably on ice and snow. Second, it provides traction, grip on slippery surfaces. The furry soles work like natural snowshoes, distributing the fox's weight and preventing it from breaking through crusty snow. The Arctic fox also has a remarkable mechanism in its paws called a countercurrent heat exchanger. Warm blood flowing from the body core into the paws passes right alongside cold blood returning from the paws back to the body. As these blood vessels run parallel to each other, heat transfers from the warm outgoing blood to the cold incoming blood. This means the paws stay cooler than the rest of the body, minimizing heat loss to the ground, while ensuring that cold blood doesn't chill the body's core. Many Arctic animals have this adaptation, but in the Arctic fox, it's particularly efficient. The fox's tail is another marvel of adaptation. It's long, bushy, and incredibly fluffy, almost as large as the rest of the fox's body. When the fox curls up to sleep or rest, it wraps this magnificent tail around itself like a blanket, covering its face and body with an extra layer of insulation. The tail can be tucked away when the fox is active and generating body heat, but brought into use whenever extra warmth is needed. In autumn, before winter's full fury arrives, the Arctic fox begins to prepare. It eats voraciously, building up fat reserves that will sustain it through the lean months ahead. By the time winter arrives, the fox may have increased its body weight by more than 50%. This fat serves a dual purpose. It provides insulation against the cold and acts as an energy reserve when food becomes scarce. Arctic foxes are monogamous, forming pairs that stay together for life. They raise their young in complex underground dens that can be quite extensive, with multiple entrances and chambers. What's truly remarkable is that these dens are used generation after generation. Some Arctic fox dens are estimated to be 300 years old, ancient family homes passed down through countless generations of foxes. During winter, the Arctic fox's diet is varied and opportunistic. In the warmer months, it primarily hunts small rodents like lemmings and voles. The fox has incredibly acute hearing. It can stand on top of packed snow and listen for lemmings moving through their tunnels beneath the surface. When a lemming is directly below, the fox springs high into the air and pounces down with its front paws, punching through the snow to catch its prey. This behavior is called mousing, and it's a joy to watch, the fox leaping and diving into the snow like a dolphin into water. But in the depths of winter, when small rodents are scarce and hidden deep beneath the snow, the Arctic fox must find other sources of food. Often, Arctic foxes will follow polar bears across the ice, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles in the bear's wake. They maintain a respectful distance. Approaching too close could be fatal, as polar bears occasionally kill foxes that venture too near. But if the fox is patient and careful, it can feast on the leftovers from the bear's seal kills. A polar bear typically eats only the fat-rich blubber of a seal, leaving much of the carcass behind. For an Arctic fox, these remains are a treasure, enough meat to sustain it for days. Research has shown that Arctic foxes can detect the scent of a seal den from as far as 1 mile away. Their sense of smell is extraordinarily sensitive, allowing them to locate food even when it's buried under deep snow. Arctic foxes are also remarkable travelers. In fall and early winter, they tend to move toward the coast and out onto the sea ice, following polar bears and searching for marine mammal carcasses. In late winter, they often reverse direction, heading back inland. But these movements are not just short journeys. Arctic foxes have been documented traveling thousands of kilometers across some of the most barren and inhospitable terrain on Earth. One particular fox became famous for her journey. In 2018, a young female Arctic fox was tagged near her den in Svalbard, Norway. Researchers tracked her as she set out on an extraordinary journey. Over the course of just 76 days, this small fox traveled more than 3,500 kilometers, crossing sea ice, frozen ocean, and barren land until she reached Ellesmere Island in northern Canada. On some days, she covered 155 kilometers, nearly 100 miles, in a single day. This remains one of the fastest and longest recorded movements of any Arctic fox, demonstrating the incredible endurance and mobility of these small creatures. In winter, the Arctic fox usually lives up to 3 or 4 years in the wild. Life is harsh, and many young foxes don't survive their first year. Food can be scarce, predators are abundant, wolves, wolverines, golden eagles, and even polar bears will kill Arctic foxes when given the opportunity. But those that do survive their vulnerable first year often become masters of Arctic living, using their intelligence, adaptability, and remarkable physical adaptations to thrive in one of Earth's most challenging environments. When food is plentiful, Arctic foxes exhibit an interesting behavior. They cache food, hiding pieces of their kill in small spaces between rocks or inside their dens. These hidden stores can be accessed later when hunting is unsuccessful. Researchers have found that cached food, even goose eggs stored for over a year, remains edible and nutritious. A single stored goose egg contains about 816 kilojoules of energy, enough to keep a fox going for nearly 2 days during winter. As we watch this small white fox move across the frozen landscape, patient, resilient, perfectly adapted, there's something deeply comforting about its presence. Here is a creature that has found a way not just to survive, but to thrive in conditions that seem impossible. It doesn't fight against the cold, it embraces it. It doesn't struggle against the darkness, it moves through it with confidence. The Arctic fox reminds us that size doesn't determine strength, that adaptation and resilience can overcome even the harshest challenges. It reminds us that sometimes the secret to survival is not to resist our environment, but to become perfectly suited to it. Let the image of the Arctic fox settle into your thoughts. This small, white creature padding silently through the frozen world, confident and calm, at peace in its icy home. Let its quiet resilience become part of your own peace. Let its patience become your patience, as you drift deeper into rest. While the polar bear moves across the surface of the ice and the Arctic fox pads silently through the snow, there is another world beneath. A hidden world. A world of darkness and cold water, where life continues in ways we can scarcely imagine. This is the realm of the ringed seal. The ringed seal is the smallest of all seals, quite delicate compared to its massive elephant seal cousins that live in warmer waters. An adult ringed seal measures only about 1.1 to 1.6 meters in length, roughly 3.5 to 5 feet. That's about the size of a large dog. They weigh between 50 and 100 kilograms, about 100 to 220 pounds. Their bodies are beautifully marked. Silver gray to brownish fur covers their backs, adorned with a distinctive pattern of small, light-colored rings, circles scattered across the darker background like little moons. These rings give them their name. Their bellies are lighter, almost white, providing subtle camouflage when seen from below against the faint light filtering through the ice. But what makes the ringed seal truly remarkable, what allows it to survive and thrive in the Arctic winter, is not its appearance, but its unique ability. The ringed seal is the only seal in the northern hemisphere that can maintain breathing holes in thick, stable ice. Using the sharp, strong claws on their front flippers, they scrape and scratch at the ice from below, carving out openings through ice that can be 6 feet thick or more. 2 meters of solid ice, and still they can maintain their connection to the air above. This remarkable adaptation allows ringed seals to live in areas where no other seal species can survive during winter. They don't need to migrate to open water. They don't need to abandon their home waters. They simply maintain their breathing holes and continue their lives beneath the frozen surface. Each seal maintains not just one breathing hole, but many, sometimes as many as 12 or more scattered across their territory. These holes serve as a network, a lifeline connecting the dark underwater world to the air above. The seal visits each hole regularly, scraping away new ice that forms, keeping the passages open throughout the long winter. The work is constant. In the depths of winter, ice can form quickly, thickening by the hour in the extreme cold. But the seal is patient and persistent. It returns to each hole again and again, its claws scratching through the fresh layers, maintaining access to the precious air above. But the ringed seal doesn't stop at breathing holes. During winter, they do something even more extraordinary. They build lairs. Above certain breathing holes, where snow has drifted deep and soft, the seal carves out small caves, chambers hollowed into the snow. These are not simple shelters. They are carefully constructed spaces, excavated from below, with the breathing hole providing access from the water. The snow above forms a roof, an insulating dome that protects the chamber inside. These lairs serve multiple purposes. During the spring, mother seals will give birth to their pups in these snow caves, nursing them in relative safety from the wind and cold. But even in winter, the lairs provide resting places, quiet chambers where a seal can hole out onto the ice within the shelter of the snow, catching its breath, resting between dives. Each seal typically constructs several lairs, providing multiple refuges throughout its territory, allowing escape if a predator discovers one chamber. The walls of these lairs can be quite thick, sometimes 50 centimeters of snow or more, providing excellent insulation from the brutal Arctic temperatures outside. Inside the lair, the temperature may be significantly warmer than the air outside, creating a microclimate where a seal can rest more comfortably. But predators know about the lairs. Polar bears, with their extraordinary sense of smell, can detect a seal lair from a great distance. Arctic foxes too can locate these hidden chambers. The foxes will sometimes tunnel through the snow, trying to reach pups inside. Polar bears use a different technique. They run across the ice and jump with all their weight onto the snow above a lair, trying to collapse the roof and block the seal's escape route back to the water. Life beneath the ice is a world of constant movement. Ringed seals are accomplished divers, descending through the dark water in search of food. They typically dive to depths of 35 to 150 feet, roughly 10 to 45 meters, searching for prey in the cold Arctic waters. They can stay submerged for up to 39 minutes, though most dives are much shorter. The longest recorded dive duration for a ringed seal was 39 minutes, more than half an hour without breathing. During this time, the seal's heart rate slows dramatically, conserving oxygen. Blood flow is redirected away from the extremities and toward vital organs, the brain, the heart, the lungs. The seal's metabolism slows, making the most efficient use possible of the oxygen stored in its blood and muscles. What does a seal see in these dark waters? The world beneath the winter ice is dimly lit at best. What little sunlight exists during the polar winter must filter through layers of snow and ice before reaching the water below. Everything exists in shades of blue and gray and black, a twilight world where vision is limited. But ringed seals have adapted to this darkness. Their eyes are large and sensitive, designed to make the most of whatever faint light exists. And they hunt prey that is abundant in these waters, Arctic cod primarily, along with herring, sculpins, and various crustaceans. Small fish and invertebrates that move through the dark waters, creating subtle vibrations that the seal can detect. Ringed seals are generally solitary creatures. Outside of the breeding season, they don't gather in groups. Each seal maintains its own territory with its own breathing holes and lairs. They hunt alone, moving through the underwater darkness in patient search of food. There is something peaceful about this solitary existence, each seal living quietly in its own space, rising periodically to breathe at one of its carefully maintained holes. When a seal surfaces at a breathing hole, it does so cautiously. The nose and whiskers appear first, testing the air, sensing for danger. Only when satisfied that it's safe does the seal fully surface, taking quick, efficient breaths before sinking back beneath the water. A ringed seal's sense of smell is remarkable. Research has shown that these seals can detect the scent of their own birth layers from as far as 1 mile away. This extraordinary olfactory ability helps them navigate beneath the ice, finding their way back to familiar territories even in complete darkness. Their hearing is equally impressive. In water, ringed seals can hear sounds ranging up to 180 kHz, far beyond the range of human hearing. This acute sense allows them to detect the movements of prey, the approach of predators like orcas or Greenland sharks, and perhaps most importantly, the sounds of ice shifting and moving above them. The average lifespan of a ringed seal in the wild is 15 to 28 years. Some seals may live longer, but many face challenges. Polar bears kill ringed seals regularly, perhaps one seal every 2 to 6 days for an active hunting bear. Ringed seals make up the majority of a polar bear's diet, making them the primary prey species in the Arctic marine ecosystem. Other predators hunt them as well. In the water, killer whales and Greenland sharks pose threats. Walruses, though less commonly, may also prey upon ringed seals. 4 young pups in their lairs, Arctic foxes and ravens present dangers. Life for a ringed seal requires constant vigilance, constant awareness of the risks that surround them. And yet, despite these dangers, ringed seals persist. They thrive. It's estimated that worldwide, there are 6 to 7 million ringed seals, making them the most abundant and widespread seal species in the Northern Hemisphere. In Alaskan waters alone, there are at least 250,000, and likely many more. As we imagine the world beneath the Arctic ice, this dark, cold realm where ringed seals glide silently through the water, there's something calming about their resilience. They have found a way to make a home in one of Earth's most challenging environments. They have adapted their bodies, their behaviors, their entire lives to match the demands of this frozen world. They don't resist the ice, they work with it. They don't fear the darkness, they navigate through it. They don't struggle against the cold, they embrace it as the condition of their existence. Let the image of the ringed seal settle into your thoughts. This small, gentle creature moving through dark water beneath the ice, rising periodically to breathe through carefully maintained holes, living its quiet, solitary life in the hidden world below. Let its patience become your patience. Let its ability to thrive in darkness remind you that even in our darkest moments, life continues, peace is possible, rest is available. Breathe, like the seal surfacing at its breathing hole, taking in what you need, then settling back into the quiet, the dark, the peace. As we continue our journey through the Arctic winter, let us turn our attention to something truly magical, something so delicate and intricate that it seems almost impossible that nature could create it. Snow. Not just snow as a blanket of white covering the ground, but snow as individual crystals. Each one a tiny work of art. Each one unique. Each one telling the story of its journey from sky to earth. A snowflake begins its life high in the atmosphere, so high that if you were standing on the ground looking up, you wouldn't be able to see where it started. The story begins when a tiny speck of dust or pollen, something so small you could never see it with the naked eye, floats through a cloud. Water vapor in the air encounters this tiny particle and something remarkable happens. The water vapor doesn't condense into a liquid droplet first. Instead, it transforms directly from gas to solid, from vapor to ice. This process is called deposition, and it's how all snow crystals are born. At the very center of every snowflake, every single one that has ever fallen, there is a perfect hexagonal ring of water molecules. Six-sided. This hexagonal shape isn't random or accidental. It's determined by the chemistry of water itself, by the angle at which water molecules naturally bond to one another. When water freezes, the molecules connect at 60-degree angles, and this creates the six-sided pattern that appears in every ice crystal. This is why snowflakes have 6 arms, 6 branches, 6 points of symmetry. It's built into the very structure of ice itself. As the tiny ice crystal begins to fall through the atmosphere, it encounters water vapor along the way. This vapor freezes onto the crystal, making it grow. The crystal gets larger and larger, building outward from that original hexagonal core. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. The shape the crystal takes, whether it grows into a flat plate or a tall column, whether it develops intricate branches or remains simple and compact, all of this is determined by the temperature and humidity the crystal experiences as it falls. Scientists have discovered that at different temperatures, ice crystals grow in different ways. Between 0 and -3 degrees Celsius, just below freezing, small plates and stars tend to form. As the temperature drops to between -3 and -10 degrees Celsius, the crystals change their behavior entirely. They grow into thin needles and long columns, shapes that look nothing like the classic 6-point snowflake most people imagine. Between -10 and -22 degrees Celsius, we enter the realm of the most beautiful snow crystals. Here, depending on the humidity, the crystals can form as plates or as large, branched structures. Around -15 degrees Celsius, in conditions of high humidity, the most spectacular stellar dendrites form. Those classic, intricate snowflakes with elaborate branches and sub-branches that look like tiny ferns made of ice. These are the snowflakes that appear in photographs and decorations, the ones that seem almost too perfect to be real. And yet, they are real. They form naturally, guided by nothing more than temperature, humidity, and the fundamental properties of water molecules. What makes each snowflake unique is the path it takes through the sky. As a crystal falls, it might begin forming in one temperature zone, then drift into a warmer layer of air, then back into a colder layer. Each change in temperature causes the crystal to adjust how it grows. If a crystal starts growing as a column in air around -5 degrees, and then falls into warmer air where plates form, the result is something called a capped column, a cylinder of ice with flat hexagonal plates growing from each end, like wheels on an axle. Because every snowflake takes a slightly different path through the atmosphere, because each one experiences slightly different combinations of temperature and humidity, each crystal develops its own unique geometry. The old saying is true: no two snowflakes are exactly alike. With so many possible combinations of conditions, with so many ways that ice can grow, the chances of two crystals following identical paths and forming identical shapes are essentially zero. Over the years, scientists have developed classification systems for snow crystals. In the 1930s, there were 21 different classifications. By 2013, that number had grown to 121 distinct types. And researchers continue to discover new variations, new categories, new ways that ice can arrange itself into patterns of crystalline beauty. But in the Arctic winter, snow takes forms beyond the familiar flakes that fall from clouds. Here, in the extreme cold, other types of ice crystals appear, each with its own poetic name. There is diamond dust. On the coldest, clearest days, when the temperature drops to -13 degrees Celsius or lower, tiny ice crystals can form directly in the air near the ground. These are not snowflakes falling from clouds. They are ice crystals that appear out of seemingly empty air, materializing when water vapor freezes directly into ice without needing a cloud at all. Diamond dust is composed of very small, unbranched crystals, usually shaped like tiny six-sided pencils. They are so small and so few in number that they are often hard to see at first. But when sunlight or moonlight strikes them, they sparkle and flash, tiny points of light glittering in the air like diamonds suspended in the atmosphere. This glittering effect gives the phenomenon its beautiful name. Diamond dust forms when a temperature inversion is present, when warmer air above the ground mixes with colder air near the surface. This mixing transports water vapor downward, increasing the relative humidity near the ground. If the air is cold enough, ice crystals simply appear, floating in the air, drifting slowly downward, catching the light. In Antarctica, at Plateau Station, diamond dust is observed on average 316 days per year. More than 70% of the precipitation that fell there in 1967 fell in the form of diamond dust. It is sometimes called clear sky precipitation, because it can fall even when the sky is cloudless, ice crystals appearing from air that looks perfectly clear. Then there is hoarfrost. Hoarfrost forms when water vapor in the air encounters a solid surface that's colder than the atmosphere around it. The vapor transforms directly into ice crystals, creating delicate, feathery structures that coat branches, fences, and any exposed surface. The crystals interlock with one another, building outward in intricate patterns that look like white lace or like salt crystals around the rim of a glass. The word hoarfrost comes from the Old English word hoary, meaning white or gray with age. On a cold morning after a clear night, hoarfrost transforms the Arctic landscape into something from a fairy tale. Every twig, every blade of grass, every surface covered in a coating of white crystal that sparkles in the faint light. And there is rime ice, though rime is different from hoarfrost in how it forms. Rime develops when water droplets suspended in freezing fog strike a cold surface and instantly freeze. Unlike hoarfrost, which forms from vapor, rime forms from liquid water that freezes on contact. It's denser than hoarfrost, harder, more compact. Rime can build up in thick layers, creating heavy coatings of ice that cling stubbornly to everything they touch. All of these forms of ice, snowflakes, diamond dust, hoarfrost, rime, are variations on a single theme. They are all water that has transformed from one state to another. They are all the result of temperature, humidity, and the unchanging geometry of water molecules arranging themselves into hexagonal patterns. In the Arctic winter, snow accumulates slowly. The air is so cold that it holds very little moisture, and so the snowfall is light, often just a few centimeters over many months. But what snow does fall remains. It doesn't melt. Instead, it builds up, layer upon layer, creating a record of the winter's weather. Like tree rings telling the story of a tree's life, layers of snow tell the story of the winter, each layer reflecting the conditions that existed when it fell. The snow on the ground transforms over time. Fresh snow is fluffy and light, full of air trapped between the delicate crystal branches. But as days pass, the crystals begin to change. They metamorphose, losing their intricate shapes, becoming more rounded, more compact. The snow settles and densifies, slowly transforming from fresh powder into something harder, more solid. This process continues for months. By the time spring arrives, the snow that fell early in winter has been transformed into something quite different from what it was when it first touched the ground. But even as it changes, even as it settles and compacts, the snow remains beautiful. It covers the Arctic landscape in a blanket of white that reflects what little light exists, making the darkness slightly less dark, the world slightly less harsh. As you imagine the Arctic snow, think of each flake as a tiny miracle. Think of the journey each crystal made, falling from high in the atmosphere, growing and changing as it descended, finally coming to rest on the frozen ground. Think of the diamond dust sparkling in the air on the coldest days. Think of the hoarfrost coating every surface with delicate crystal lace. Each crystal is temporary, each one will eventually melt or sublimate back into vapor. But while it exists, it is perfect. While it exists, it is unique. While it exists, it is beautiful. Let the image of falling snow settle into your thoughts, millions of tiny crystals drifting silently through the dark Arctic sky. Each one different, each one following its own path, all of them together creating the peaceful winter landscape. Let their gentle descent become your own descent, into rest, into peace, into sleep. In the Arctic winter, the air itself becomes a force, invisible but undeniable. The wind is not merely a breeze or a gust, it is a presence that shapes the landscape, moves the snow, and tests every living thing that calls this frozen world home. The winds of the Arctic come from many directions, but some winds are more powerful, more dramatic, than others. These are the katabatic winds. The word katabatic comes from the ancient Greek word katabasis, which means descent or going down. And that is exactly what these winds do. They descend. Imagine vast ice sheets and high plateaus, places where the ice rises thousands of meters above sea level. At night, when there is no sun to warm the surface, and in the Arctic winter, when the sun doesn't rise at all for months, something remarkable happens. The ice radiates away whatever heat it has absorbed, cooling rapidly. The air in contact with this frigid surface also cools, becoming denser, heavier, than the air around it. Cold air is heavier than warm air. This is a simple principle, but its effects in the Arctic are profound. The cold, dense air begins to sink under its own weight. And because the ice sheets are elevated, because they sit high above the surrounding terrain, gravity takes hold. The heavy, cold air begins to flow downhill, moving down the slopes like an invisible river of cold. This is the katabatic wind, air flowing downslope simply because it has become too heavy to stay at the top. In Greenland, these winds have a special name. They are called pittorak, a word from the Greenlandic language. The pittorak are most intense when a low-pressure weather system approaches the coast. The pressure difference between the high plateau and the lower coastal areas becomes extreme, and the cold air accelerates as it rushes down the slopes. Pittorak winds are extraordinarily powerful. They typically reach speeds of 100 to 150 knots. That's about 115 to 173 miles per hour. Wind speeds equivalent to a major hurricane. And yet, this is wind caused not by a storm, but simply by cold air flowing downhill. In 1970, the strongest pittorak ever recorded struck the small village of Tassilak on Greenland's east coast. Wind gusts exceeded 160 knots, more than 180 miles per hour. That's stronger than a Category 5 Atlantic hurricane. The damage was so severe, so catastrophic, that officials seriously considered closing the town permanently, abandoning it to the winds. Instead, the people of Tassilak created an official warning system specifically for pittorak events. Now, when conditions suggest a pittorak is approaching, an alarm sounds throughout the village, giving people time to seek shelter and secure anything that might be blown away. These katabatic winds are strongest during winter, when there is no incoming solar radiation to interrupt the cooling process. In the depths of the polar night, the ice sheets remain cold continuously, and a large pool of dense, frigid air builds up over the interior. This pool of cold air feeds the katabatic flow, sending wave after wave of icy wind cascading down toward the coast. The winds are channeled by the landscape, funneled through valleys and mountain passes where they can reach truly extraordinary speeds. In these restricted areas, where the wind is compressed and accelerated, velocities can blow well over hurricane force, reaching around 160 knots or even higher. Antarctica experiences similar winds. There, the katabatic winds blow outward from the vast interior ice sheet toward the coast. The ice sheet of East Antarctica is so large, so elevated, that it creates its own weather patterns. Cold air pools on top of the ice, then flows downward in all directions, guided by the slope of the terrain beneath. The flow is strongest where the topography channels it, where valleys and coastal escarpments focus the wind into narrow corridors. At stations on the Antarctic coast, katabatic winds are observed throughout much of the year, but they are most pronounced during winter, when the cold is most intense and the temperature difference between the plateau and the coast is greatest. One particular stretch of the Antarctic coast, in Adélie Land, is famous, or perhaps infamous, for its relentless winds. The topography there channels the katabatic flow onto a small section of coastline, creating some of the strongest and most persistent winds on Earth. It was here that Douglas Mawson's expedition, in 1912 to 1913, recorded the Earth's highest annual mean wind speed, 19.4 meters per second, or about 43 miles per hour, as an average over an entire year. During that winter, the expedition experienced gale-force winds on all but one day out of 203 consecutive winter days. Imagine 202 days of gale-force winds, day after day after day of wind that never stops, never relents. But katabatic winds are not the only winds that shape the Arctic winter. There are also blizzards, winter storms that combine falling snow, high winds, and brutal cold into conditions that can be deadly. For a storm to be classified as a blizzard, specific conditions must be met. The winds must be strong, at least 56 km per hour, or about 35 miles per hour, with frequent gusts that may be even stronger. These winds must cause blowing or drifting snow that reduces visibility to 400 meters or less, about a quarter of a mile. And these conditions must persist for at least 3 to 4 hours. A severe blizzard is even more intense. Winds exceed 72 km per hour, 4 to 5 miles per hour, visibility drops to near zero, and temperatures plunge to -12 degrees Celsius or lower, about 10 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. During a blizzard, the world becomes white. Sky and ground merge into a single, featureless expanse. This is called a whiteout, a condition where there is no visible horizon, no depth perception, no way to tell up from down or near from far. The horizon simply disappears. Everything, absolutely everything, becomes the same shade of white. In a true whiteout, a person can become disoriented just steps from their door. They might be only 3 meters, 10 feet, from safety, and yet be unable to find their way back. The complete loss of visual reference is profoundly disorienting, almost hypnotic in its completeness. Interestingly, a blizzard doesn't necessarily require heavy snowfall. What defines a blizzard is the wind and the visibility, not the amount of snow falling from the sky. In fact, one of the most dangerous types of blizzard is called a ground blizzard, a storm where no new snow is falling at all. A ground blizzard occurs when strong winds pick up snow that's already on the ground, loose, powdery snow, and blow it into the air. If there are several inches of fresh, light snow covering the landscape, winds of 50 to 60 miles per hour can quickly lift this snow and create complete whiteout conditions, even under a clear sky. Ground blizzards are particularly dangerous because they can develop rapidly when an Arctic cold front moves through. The temperature drops suddenly, sometimes 20 or 30 degrees in less than an hour. The wind increases just as quickly, reaching gale force in minutes. And if there's fresh snow on the ground, visibility can drop from miles to nearly zero in moments. The cold temperatures that follow Arctic fronts make these ground blizzards especially hazardous. With wind chills dropping to -40, -50, even -60 degrees Fahrenheit, anyone caught outside is at immediate risk of frostbite and hypothermia. Exposed skin can freeze in less than 10 minutes under such conditions. One of the most infamous ground blizzards in history was the Children's Blizzard of 1888, which struck the Great Plains of the United States. It was particularly deadly because it was preceded by unseasonably warm weather. The morning dawned mild, almost spring-like, and many people went about their day without proper winter clothing. Children walked to school in light jackets. But in the afternoon, an Arctic front swept south. The temperature plummeted. Winds increased to gale force. And because there was fresh snow on the ground from earlier storms, that snow was lifted into the air, creating instant whiteout conditions. Many people, including children trying to walk home from school, became lost and disoriented just yards from safety. An estimated 235 people died in that storm, many of them children, frozen to death within sight of shelter they could not see. The Arctic wind does not discriminate. It affects all living things equally. Animals that have adapted to the cold still seek shelter from the wind. Polar bears dig into snowdrifts, letting the snow pile over them. Arctic foxes burrow into the snow, creating temporary dens. Even the hardy musk ox, with their thick coats, huddle together in groups, presenting their backs to the wind while the young shelter in the center of the group. Wind also shapes the snow itself. It carves the surface into patterns, creating drifts and sastrugi, sharp, wave-like ridges of hard snow that form parallel to the prevailing wind direction. These features can be just a few centimeters high, or they can rise to a meter or more, frozen waves in an ocean of snow. In areas where katabatic winds are particularly strong and persistent, the wind can scour the snow away entirely, leaving bare ice or even exposed ground. In Antarctica, there are entire valleys, the McMurdo Dry Valleys, where the katabatic winds are so strong that snow cannot accumulate at all. The wind removes every flake, creating landscapes that look more like Mars than Earth, barren, rocky terrain in the middle of the ice sheet. But for all their power, for all their fury, the Arctic winds are simply another element of this frozen world. They are neither good nor evil, they simply are. They move the air, redistribute the snow, shape the ice. They are part of the system, part of the balance that defines the Arctic. As we imagine these winds sweeping across the ice, invisible rivers of cold air flowing down from the heights, let us recognize their power but also their purpose. They are part of what makes the Arctic what it is. Without the wind, the landscape would be different. The snow would sit undisturbed. The ice would form in different patterns. The very climate would change. The wind, like the cold, like the darkness, is simply a condition of existence in this place. And the creatures that live here have learned to work with it, to shelter from it when necessary, to accept it when shelter is not possible. Let the image of the Arctic wind settle into your thoughts, not as something to fear, but as a force of nature. Powerful, yes, but also natural, simply another element of this remarkable frozen world. Breathe slowly, let your breath be calm and steady. Unlike the fierce winds of the Arctic, let your breathing be peaceful, gentle, quiet. In the vastness of the Arctic winter, life persists in forms both familiar and extraordinary. Beyond the polar bears and Arctic foxes, beyond the seals beneath the ice, there are other creatures that call this frozen world home. Some fly through the darkness on silent wings. Others burrow beneath the snow. Some stand in herds against the wind, while others hop about seeking seeds beneath the surface. Let us begin with a bird, a hunter of the darkness, the snowy owl. The snowy owl is one of the largest owl species on Earth. Males can weigh about 1.6 kilograms, roughly 3.5 pounds, while females are even larger, sometimes reaching 2.5 kilograms, about 5.5 pounds. Their wingspan can exceed 1.5 meters, nearly 5 feet from tip to tip. Unlike most owl species, which are creatures of the forest and the night, the snowy owl lives in open tundra and hunts during the day. Or rather, during what passes for day in the Arctic winter. In the polar night, when the sun never rises, the snowy owl hunts in perpetual twilight, in the dim blue darkness, in the brief moments of dawn-like glow that appear around midday. Their eyes are remarkable. Proportionally, an owl's eyes are enormous. If human eyes were the same relative size, they would be as large as oranges. These huge eyes gather every available photon of light, allowing the snowy owl to see in conditions that would leave us completely blind. But the snowy owl does not rely on vision alone. Like all owls, they possess extraordinary hearing. Their facial disc, the flat, round face that gives owls their distinctive appearance, acts as a parabolic reflector, focusing sound waves toward their ear openings. And those ear openings are asymmetrical, positioned at slightly different heights on either side of the head. This asymmetry is not an accident. It is a hunting adaptation. When a small animal moves beneath the snow, a lemming scurrying through its tunnels, it creates tiny sounds. These sounds reach the owl's ears at fractionally different times and from slightly different angles. The owl's brain processes this information instantly, creating a precise three-dimensional map of where the sound originated. The snowy owl can hunt by sound alone. It can pinpoint prey moving beneath 30 centimeters, nearly a foot, of snow, and strike with perfect accuracy, plunging its talons through the snow to grasp an animal it has never seen. During the breeding season in summer, a single snowy owl family can consume more than 1,500 lemmings. That's roughly 1,600 prey animals in the span of a few months. But in winter, when lemmings are scarce and hidden deep beneath the snow, the owls must work harder for each meal. Snowy owls are nomadic. Unlike many Arctic animals that have defined territories, snowy owls wander, moving wherever prey can be found. In winters when lemming populations crash, which happens in cycles of about 3 to 5 years, snowy owls may leave the high Arctic entirely, traveling south in what ornithologists call an eruption. During eruption years, snowy owls have been recorded as far south as the northern United States, sitting on fence posts in farm fields, on beaches, even on buildings in cities. They are searching for food, for anything to replace the lemmings they depend upon. But not all birds leave when winter comes. The common raven stays throughout the darkest months, earning its reputation as one of the hardiest birds on earth. Ravens are members of the corvid family, a group that includes crows, jays, and magpies, and they are among the most intelligent of all birds. They can solve complex problems, use tools, plan for the future, and even engage in what appears to be play. In the Arctic winter, ravens survive by being opportunistic. They are omnivores and scavengers, eating almost anything they can find. They follow polar bears, waiting for a chance to steal scraps from a seal kill. They patrol shorelines, searching for marine organisms washed up by storms. They eat berries, seeds, insects frozen in the snow, bird eggs when available, and carrion, the frozen remains of animals that didn't survive. Ravens have been observed caching food, hiding it in numerous locations across their territory and remembering where they placed each item. This remarkable spatial memory allows them to create a network of food reserves scattered across the landscape, ensuring they have resources even during the harshest weather. One of the raven's most remarkable adaptations to cold is behavioral. On the coldest days, ravens fluff their feathers extensively, creating a thick layer of insulating air around their bodies. They can increase their apparent size by nearly 50% simply by adjusting their plumage. Beneath this insulation, their body temperature remains a constant 40 degrees Celsius, about 104 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the air temperature is -40. Ravens also have specialized blood vessels in their legs. The arteries carrying warm blood from the body run alongside veins carrying cold blood back from the feet. This countercurrent heat exchange system pre-cools the arterial blood and pre-warms the venous blood, minimizing heat loss through the feet while preventing the feet from freezing. But what do the snowy owls hunt? What provides sustenance for the ravens when other food is scarce? The answer, very often, is the lemming. Lemmings are small rodents, typically weighing between 30 and 112 grams, about 1 to 4 ounces. There are several species in the Arctic, but all share similar adaptations to winter life. Unlike most Arctic animals, lemmings do not hibernate. They remain active throughout winter, living in an elaborate network of tunnels beneath the snow. This under-snow environment, the space between the frozen ground and the snowpack above, is called the subnivean zone. Subnivean comes from Latin, sub meaning under and niveus meaning snowy. The subnivean zone is a hidden world. Snow is an excellent insulator, and even when the air temperature above is -30 or -40 degrees Celsius, the temperature in the subnivean zone hovers near zero, right around freezing. This is still cold by most standards, but it is 30 to 40 degrees warmer than the exposed surface. Within this relatively protected environment, lemmings create an extensive tunnel system. They carve pathways through the snow to feeding areas where vegetation is accessible. They build nests of dried grass and moss. They even create latrines, designated bathroom areas, keeping their living spaces clean. Lemmings have an extraordinarily high metabolism. To maintain their body temperature in cold conditions, they must eat almost constantly, consuming roughly their own body weight in vegetation every day. They feed on grasses, sedges, moss, and woody plant shoots, whatever they can reach beneath the snow. This constant feeding supports year-round reproduction. Unlike most Arctic mammals, which breed only during the brief summer, lemmings can reproduce throughout winter in the subnivean zone. A female lemming can produce multiple litters between September and March, with each litter containing up to 8 young. This explains why lemming populations can explode during favorable conditions. But lemming populations are cyclical. Every 3 to 5 years, populations crash dramatically. Scientists are still studying exactly why this happens, but it appears to involve a combination of factors: predation pressure, food availability, stress, and possibly even the quality of available vegetation. When lemming populations are high, predators thrive. Snowy owls produce large clutches of eggs. Arctic foxes have big litters. But when lemming populations crash, the entire ecosystem feels the effect. Predators go hungry, reproduction declines, and some species, like the snowy owl, leave the Arctic entirely in search of food elsewhere. Now let us turn from the small to the large, from the lemming to the musk ox. The musk ox is an Ice Age survivor. Its ancestors evolved during the Pleistocene, the last ice age, and they once roamed across Europe, Asia, and North America alongside woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. As the climate warmed and the Ice Age ended, most of these species went extinct. But the musk ox survived in the far north, persisting in the one place that remained cold enough to suit them. A fully grown musk ox can weigh between 200 and 400 kilograms, roughly 450 to 900 pounds. Bulls are larger than cows, with massive curved horns that meet at the center of the forehead in a thick boss, a bony shield that can be used as a battering ram during the breeding season when males compete for females. But the musk ox's most distinctive feature is its coat. It consists of two layers. The outer layer is made of long, coarse guard hairs that can hang down nearly to the ground, giving the animal a shaggy, almost prehistoric appearance. Beneath this outer layer lies civiate, an inner coat of incredibly fine, soft wool. Civiate is one of the finest natural fibers in the world. Each fiber is only about 15 to 20 micrometers in diameter, finer than cashmere, finer than the softest merino wool. It is 8 times warmer than sheep's wool by weight and does not shrink in water. Indigenous peoples of the Arctic have long collected civiate, either by combing it from the animals during spring shedding or by gathering it from places where musk oxen have rubbed against rocks. This remarkable coat allows musk oxen to withstand temperatures that would be lethal to most mammals. They have been observed resting comfortably in conditions of -40 degrees Celsius with winds of 50 kilometers per hour, conditions that produce a wind chill equivalent to -70 degrees. Musk oxen are grazers, feeding on grasses, sedges, willows, and other Arctic vegetation. In winter, when plants are buried beneath snow, they use their broad hooves and strong heads to dig through the snow, creating feeding craters. Sometimes they must dig through 60 centimeters, nearly 2 feet, of packed snow to reach the frozen vegetation beneath. Unlike caribou, which migrate hundreds or even thousands of kilometers between summer and winter ranges, musk oxen are relatively sedentary. They remain in their territories year-round, moving only short distances between feeding areas. When threatened by wolves, their primary predator, musk oxen form a defensive circle. The adults face outward with their horns toward the threat, while calves are protected in the center. This formation is nearly impregnable. A full-grown musk ox with lowered horns is a formidable opponent, and wolves rarely risk a direct attack against a defensive herd. However, this defensive strategy, so effective against wolves, proved disastrous when humans arrived with firearms. A herd standing in a tight circle presented an easy target. By the early 20th century, musk oxen had been hunted to extinction across most of their range. They survived only in remote areas of northeastern Greenland and Arctic Canada. Conservation efforts in the mid-20th century brought musk oxen back from the brink. They were reintroduced to Alaska, where they had been extinct since the 1860s. They were also introduced to areas of Siberia, Norway, and Sweden where they had not lived in recent historical times. Today, muskox populations have recovered significantly, numbering around 130,000 to 150,000 individuals across the Arctic. These four creatures, the snowy owl, the raven, the lemming, and the musk ox, represent different strategies for surviving the Arctic winter. The owl is a specialized predator, perfectly adapted to hunt in near darkness. The raven is an intelligent generalist, using problem-solving skills and behavioral flexibility to exploit whatever resources become available. The lemming thrives by retreating beneath the snow, creating a hidden world where life continues despite the surface cold. And the musk ox simply endures, standing firm against the wind, insulated by a coat that evolved in the Ice Age and never needed improvement. Together with the polar bear, the Arctic fox, the ringed seal, and all the other species that inhabit this frozen realm, they form an ecosystem, a web of relationships and dependencies that functions even in the coldest, darkest months of the year. As you imagine these animals, the owl soaring silently overhead, the raven's dark form against white snow, the lemming safe in its tunnels, the musk oxen standing together against the wind, let their resilience fill your thoughts. They do not struggle against the Arctic winter. They are part of it. They belong to it. Let your breathing slow, like an animal at rest, conserving energy, peaceful and calm. Beneath the frozen surface of the Arctic, beneath the ice that covers the ocean like a lid, there exists another world. A world of darkness and cold, yes, but also a world of movement, of life, of extraordinary adaptations that allow creatures to thrive in conditions that seem impossible. The Arctic Ocean is the smallest of Earth's 5 oceans, covering approximately 14 million square kilometers, about 5.4 million square miles. It is also the shallowest ocean, with an average depth of only 1,000 meters, roughly 3,300 feet. But what makes it truly unique is the ice. During winter, sea ice covers nearly the entire Arctic Ocean. At its maximum extent, typically reached in March, Arctic sea ice can cover about 15 million square kilometers. This ice is not a solid, uniform sheet. It is a dynamic, ever-changing mosaic of ice flows, pieces that drift with currents and winds, colliding with each other, cracking apart, refreezing together. The ice itself is not uniform in thickness. First-year ice, ice that formed during the current winter season, is typically 30 to 200 centimeters thick, roughly 1 to 7 feet. But multi-year ice, ice that has survived at least one summer melt season, can be 3 to 4 meters thick, 10 to 13 feet, or even more in areas where ice has been pushed together and piled up. When seawater freezes, something remarkable happens. Salt does not easily fit into the crystal structure of ice. As ice forms, most of the salt is expelled from the freezing water, left behind in the liquid ocean below. This means that sea ice is much less salty than the ocean water from which it formed. Fresh ice might contain about 5 to 10 parts per thousand of salt, while the seawater beneath contains about 35 parts per thousand. As the ice ages, brine, concentrated salt water, drains out through tiny channels, and the ice becomes even fresher. Multi-year ice can be fresh enough to melt and drink. This rejection of salt during freezing has profound consequences. The expelled salt makes the water immediately beneath the forming ice even saltier and therefore denser. This dense, salty water sinks, creating vertical circulation that mixes the ocean. This process, called brine rejection, is one of the drivers of global ocean circulation, part of the great conveyor belt that moves water throughout all the world's oceans. But life finds ways to exist even here, in water that hovers just barely above the freezing point. The temperature beneath Arctic sea ice in winter is typically around -1.8 degrees Celsius, about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Seawater can remain liquid below 0 degrees because salt depresses the freezing point. At this temperature, most organisms would simply freeze. The water inside their cells would turn to ice, rupturing cell membranes and causing death. But Arctic marine organisms have evolved remarkable adaptations. Many Arctic fish produce antifreeze proteins, special molecules that bind to tiny ice crystals and prevent them from growing. These antifreeze proteins don't lower the freezing point very much, only about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, but that small difference is enough. It's the difference between survival and death. The Arctic cod is a master of this adaptation. This small fish, typically 10 to 20 centimeters long, about 4 to 8 inches, produces antifreeze glycoproteins in its blood and bodily fluids. These molecules allow the Arctic cod to remain active and swimming even when surrounded by ice crystals in the water. The Arctic cod is a keystone species in the Arctic marine ecosystem. It serves as a crucial link in the food web, feeding on tiny zooplankton and in turn being eaten by seals, seabirds, and larger fish. During winter, Arctic cod are often found in large schools directly beneath the sea ice, in the very coldest water. They seem to prefer this location, perhaps because predators are less common there, or because the underside of the ice provides some form of shelter. The underside of sea ice is not smooth. It is rough and textured, with ridges, channels, and pockets. And remarkably, surprisingly, it supports life. Even in the depths of winter, microscopic algae, ice algae, grow attached to the underside of the ice. These single-celled organisms live at the interface between ice and water, in a thin layer sometimes called the skeletal layer. Here, in narrow brine channels within the ice and in the rough surface texture, ice algae form communities. How do they survive? How can they photosynthesize when there is so little light in the polar night? The answer lies in their remarkable efficiency. Ice algae can photosynthesize at light levels as low as 1 to 5 micromoles of photons per square meter per second. To put this in perspective, full sunlight provides about 2,000 micromoles. These algae can function on less than 1%, less than 0.5% of full sunlight. During the polar night, when the sun never rises, there is still a dim glow around midday, a faint twilight that provides just enough light for these specialized organisms. And as winter progresses toward spring, as the days begin to lengthen, the ice algae respond immediately, beginning to grow and multiply weeks before the ice above them begins to melt. By March and April, ice algae communities can become so dense that they turn the underside of the ice brown or green. This ice algae bloom is one of the first signs of returning biological productivity in the Arctic. It happens before the phytoplankton bloom in the open water, before most other forms of life have begun their spring awakening. And this early bloom is crucial. Tiny zooplankton, copepods and amphipods, graze on the ice algae. These tiny crustaceans, in turn, are food for Arctic cod, which are food for seals and seabirds. The ice algae bloom triggers a cascade of life throughout the Arctic marine ecosystem. One particular creature thrives in this under-ice environment, the Arctic amphipod, Gammarus wilkitsky. This small crustacean, typically 2 to 3 centimeters long, about 1 inch, spends its entire life on the underside of sea ice. Like Arctic cod, it produces antifreeze compounds. But it also has another adaptation, the ability to tolerate extremely low oxygen levels. Water beneath ice can sometimes become depleted of oxygen, especially in areas where ice coverage is continuous and there's little exchange with the atmosphere. The Arctic amphipod can survive oxygen concentrations that would suffocate most other animals. These amphipods feed on ice algae, scraping them from the underside of the ice. In turn, they are eaten by Arctic cod and by seabirds during summer. They can be so numerous that in some areas, thousands of individuals inhabit a single square meter of ice underside. But the ice is not merely a habitat, it is also a refuge. Beneath and within the sea ice, creatures find protection from predators, shelter from currents, and access to food that other animals cannot reach. Some seals, particularly ringed seals, maintain breathing holes through the ice throughout winter. But they are not the only marine mammals that deal with the ice-covered ocean. Narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, spend their winters in areas of the Arctic Ocean that remain partially ice-covered even in the darkest months. Narwhals are medium-sized whales. Males are larger than females, reaching about 4 to 5 meters in length, roughly 13 to 16 feet, and weighing around 1,600 kilograms, about 3,500 pounds. But the narwhal's most distinctive feature is the tusk, a long, spiral tooth that projects from the male's upper jaw. This tusk is actually an elongated left canine tooth that grows throughout the animal's life, spiraling in a left-handed helix. It can reach lengths of 2 to 3 meters, 7 to 10 feet, making it nearly as long as the whale's body. The tusk has millions of nerve endings and appears to function as a sensory organ, detecting changes in water temperature, pressure, and chemical composition. Narwhals are deep divers. They regularly descend to depths of 800 to 1,000 meters, 2,600 to 3,300 feet, and they can go even deeper, with dives recorded to depths of 1,800 meters, nearly 6,000 feet. These dives last 15 to 25 minutes, during which the narwhal hunts for Greenland halibut, Arctic cod, and squid. These hunting dives occur in near-total darkness. At depths of 1,000 meters, no sunlight penetrates. The narwhal must rely on echolocation, using sound to navigate and find prey in the absolute darkness of the deep Arctic Ocean. During winter, narwhals concentrate in specific areas where cracks and openings in the ice, called polynyas and leads, remain open despite the cold. A polynya is an area of open water surrounded by ice. Some polynyas form in the same locations year after year, maintained by upwelling currents, wind patterns, or tidal action that prevents ice from forming. Narwhals require these openings to breathe. Unlike seals, which maintain individual breathing holes through relatively thin ice, narwhals need larger areas of open water. They travel in groups, sometimes hundreds or even thousands together, moving between breathing areas beneath the ice. This is a dangerous way to live. If ice conditions change rapidly, if a polynya freezes over during a severe cold snap, entire groups of narwhals can become trapped. Events called ice entrapments or sassots in the Inuit language have been documented throughout history. Dozens or even hundreds of narwhals, unable to reach open water to breathe, perish trapped beneath the ice. But for all its dangers, the ice-covered Arctic Ocean in winter is not a barren wasteland. It is an ecosystem functioning in slow motion, in darkness, in cold that would seem incompatible with life. From the microscopic ice algae clinging to the underside of the ice, to the tiny amphipods grazing upon them, to the Arctic cod swimming in schools in the frigid water, to the seals maintaining their breathing holes, to the narwhals diving deep in search of prey, life continues. The water is not still. Ocean currents continue to flow beneath the ice, carrying nutrients, moving water masses, connecting the Arctic Ocean to the Atlantic and Pacific. The Beaufort Gyre, a massive circular ocean current in the western Arctic, continues its slow rotation. The transpolar drift, a current that moves ice and water from the Siberian coast across the North Pole toward Greenland, continues its centuries-old pattern. These currents bring water from distant places. Atlantic water, warmer and saltier, flows into the Arctic Ocean from the Norwegian Sea, diving beneath the colder, fresher Arctic surface water. Pacific water enters through the Bering Strait, the narrow passage between Alaska and Siberia, bringing different chemical properties and different nutrients. The mixing of these water masses, the circulation patterns they create, and the nutrients they carry all influence the life that exists in the Arctic Ocean. The ocean is not isolated. It is connected, part of a global system of ocean circulation that links all the world's oceans together. As you imagine this hidden world beneath the ice, the darkness, the cold, the slow persistence of life in the most unlikely of places, let it bring a sense of quiet wonder. Life adapts. Life persists. Even in the coldest, darkest depths, life finds a way. Let your thoughts drift like the slow currents beneath the ice, gentle, steady, continuous, flowing peacefully through the darkness. The Arctic is not empty. It has never been empty. For thousands of years, long before written records, long before the arrival of explorers from southern lands, people have lived in the Arctic. They have not merely survived, they have thrived, creating cultures, languages, technologies, and ways of life perfectly adapted to one of Earth's most challenging environments. Today, approximately 4 million people live in the Arctic region. Of these, roughly 10%, about 400,000 individuals, are indigenous peoples belonging to more than 40 different ethnic groups. They include the Inuit of Canada, Greenland, and Alaska, the Sami of northern Scandinavia and Russia, the Nenets, Yakuts, and Chuki of Siberia, and many others, each with their own distinct languages, traditions, and histories. These peoples have accumulated knowledge over countless generations, knowledge about ice conditions, weather patterns, animal behavior, and seasonal changes. This knowledge is not written in books. It is passed down through stories, through observation, through lived experience. It is knowledge embedded in language itself. The Inuit languages, for example, have multiple words for different types of snow and ice, not because they find snow exotic or fascinating, but because distinctions matter for survival. Pukak is the crystalline snow that forms beneath the surface, the kind that caribou can dig through to reach vegetation. Siku is sea ice in general, but Chinyu specifically means slushy ice forming in the sea, while Nilek is freshwater ice that is clear and strong enough to drink. These are not mere vocabulary exercises. They are survival tools. Knowing which type of ice is safe to walk on, which snow is suitable for building, which ice formation indicates a seal's breathing hole, this knowledge has kept people alive for millennia. The relationship between Arctic peoples and their environment is one of deep interdependence. The land and sea provide everything needed for life: food, shelter, clothing, tools, fuel. But the environment demands respect, attention, and adaptability in return. Traditional Arctic dwellings reflect this relationship. The igloo, from the Inuit word ilu, simply meaning house, is perhaps the most famous Arctic shelter. Built from blocks of wind-packed snow, a properly constructed igloo is a marvel of engineering and thermal efficiency. Snow is an excellent insulator. The air trapped between snow crystals slows the transfer of heat. A well-built igloo, even without any internal heat source, will be warmer inside than outside simply because it blocks the wind and traps still air. But with body heat and a small oil lamp called a kulik, that's QULLIQ, the interior temperature of an igloo can reach 10 to 20 degrees Celsius, 50 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, even when the outside air is -40. The temperature difference can be 50 or 60 degrees, a difference between freezing and comfortable, created by nothing more than shaped snow, body heat, and a small flame. The construction technique matters enormously. Blocks must be cut from the right type of snow, wind-packed snow that is dense and strong. The blocks are laid in a spiral, each one tilted slightly inward, creating a dome that is self-supporting. The final block, the key block, is placed from inside, completing the structure. A small entrance tunnel is built below floor level, creating a cold trap. Cold air, being denser, sinks into the tunnel, while warmer air remains in the living space above. This simple design feature dramatically improves the interior temperature. The kulik, the traditional lamp, is another example of ingenious technology. Carved from soapstone, the kulik burns seal oil or whale blubber, providing both heat and light. The flame is controlled by adjusting the wick, traditionally made from Arctic cotton or moss, and by trimming the flame's height and width. In skilled hands, the kulik provides a steady, controllable heat source that can last for hours without attention. It can be used for cooking, for melting ice into drinking water, for drying wet clothing, and for providing light during the dark winter months. Clothing, too, reflects generations of accumulated knowledge. Traditional Arctic clothing is made from animal skins and furs: caribou, seal, polar bear, Arctic fox, bird skins, each chosen for specific properties and used in specific ways. Caribou hide is particularly valued. The individual hairs of caribou fur are hollow, filled with air, making them extraordinarily light and insulating. A caribou skin parka can weigh less than 2 kilograms, about 4 pounds, yet provide warmth in temperatures of -40 degrees or colder. But the construction is as important as the material. Traditional parkas use 2 layers, an inner layer with fur facing inward against the skin, and an outer layer with fur facing outward. This creates an insulating airspace between the layers while also managing moisture. Warm, moist air from the body can escape through tiny gaps in the stitching, preventing the dangerous accumulation of moisture that would reduce insulation and eventually freeze. The design includes other sophisticated features. Hoods are large and fur-lined, protecting the face from wind. Sleeves are cut to allow freedom of movement while minimizing exposed skin. The parka extends well below the waist, protecting vital organs. Every element serves a purpose. There is no decoration without function. In recent decades, Researchers have tested traditional Arctic clothing against modern synthetic materials in controlled conditions. The results consistently show that well-made traditional clothing performs as well as or better than the most advanced modern gear. This represents thousands of years of iterative design, each generation making small improvements until arriving at something close to optimal. Traditional hunting practices also reflect deep understanding of animal behavior and ecology. Inuit hunters have observed and recorded caribou migration patterns for centuries, knowing precisely when herds will pass through certain valleys or cross certain rivers. They have documented the seasonal movements of seals, the behavior of polar bears, the locations where certain fish spawn. This knowledge includes details that Western scientists have only recently begun to appreciate. For example, traditional knowledge has long held that bowhead whales, massive Arctic whales that can live more than 200 years, return to the same feeding areas year after year, sometimes across multiple generations. Scientific research using satellite tags and genetic analysis has confirmed this, but indigenous hunters knew it from direct observation across centuries. Similarly, indigenous peoples have long understood that ice conditions are connected to ocean currents, wind patterns, and weather systems in complex ways. They have observed that certain wind directions produce certain types of ice formation, that the ice behaves differently at different times of the moon cycle, that changes in one part of the system affect distant areas. This holistic understanding, this recognition that everything is connected, is perhaps the most important aspect of traditional Arctic knowledge. The Arctic is not seen as a collection of separate elements, ice, animals, weather, land, sea, but as an integrated whole where every part affects every other part. Today, this traditional knowledge is increasingly recognized as valuable not only for indigenous communities but for understanding broader environmental changes. As the Arctic warms faster than any other region on Earth, indigenous peoples are observing changes in ice patterns, animal behavior, and weather that may provide early warnings of larger transformations. They have noted that sea ice forms later in autumn and breaks up earlier in spring. They have observed changes in caribou migration routes, in the distribution of fish species, in the frequency of storms. These observations, accumulated over lifetimes and shared across communities, provide a form of monitoring that scientific instruments alone cannot replicate. The traditional practices of Arctic peoples represent humanity's longest-running experiment in sustainable living in an extreme environment. For thousands of years, communities have taken what they needed from the environment while maintaining the health of animal populations and the integrity of ecosystems. This required careful management, social rules about harvest levels, and a deep understanding of population dynamics. The relationship is not romantic or mystical, it is practical. People learned through necessity, through trial and error spanning generations, through close observation and careful thought. They learned which animals to hunt and which to leave alone, when to harvest and when to wait, how much could be taken without depleting future resources. This knowledge continues to evolve. Arctic indigenous peoples today use GPS, snowmobiles, modern rifles, and smartphones alongside traditional knowledge and practices. The combination of old wisdom and new technology allows them to maintain their connection to the land while adapting to changing conditions. As we think about the Arctic, about this frozen realm we have explored through these segments, it is important to remember that it is not a wilderness untouched by humans. It is home. It has been home for longer than we can trace. The people who live there have shaped it and been shaped by it, creating a relationship with the cold, the ice, and the darkness that is both practical and profound. Let this knowledge settle into your thoughts, the understanding that humans, too, are part of the Arctic ecosystem, that we are capable of living in balance with even the most challenging environments when we pay attention, when we adapt, when we learn from the land itself. Breathe slowly. Let your breath be as steady as the patient accumulation of knowledge across generations, calm, peaceful, continuous. Nothing lasts forever. Even the longest night must end. Even the deepest cold must eventually yield. And so it is with the Arctic winter. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the darkness begins to lift. The sun, absent for months, begins its slow return. The transition does not happen suddenly. There is no single moment when winter becomes spring. Instead, there is a gradual unfolding, a slow brightening, a subtle warming that takes place over weeks and months. At the North Pole itself, the sun sets on the autumn equinox, around September 21st, and does not rise again until the spring equinox, approximately 6 months later, around March 20th. But the return of light begins before the actual sunrise. First comes civil twilight. This occurs when the sun is between 0 and 6 degrees below the horizon. During civil twilight, there is enough natural light to see clearly without artificial illumination. The sky glows, not with full daylight, but with a soft, diffused brightness. At the North Pole, civil twilight begins roughly 2 weeks before the sun actually breaks the horizon. The sky, which has been dark for months, begins to show color again, deep blues and purples at first, then gradually warming to oranges and pinks. For people and animals that have lived through the polar night, this returning light triggers profound changes. It is not just a physical phenomenon, it is a signal, a promise, a transformation. Human circadian rhythms, which have been disrupted by months of darkness, begin to recalibrate. Sleep patterns become more regular. Mood improves. Even though the temperature may still be extremely cold, -30, -40 degrees or colder, the light itself brings a sense of renewal. The sun's return follows a predictable pattern based on latitude. At the Arctic Circle, 66.5 degrees north, the sun dips below the horizon for exactly 1 day at the winter solstice. As you move north from the Arctic Circle, the period of continuous darkness lengthens. At 70 degrees north, the sun remains below the horizon for about 65 days. At 80 degrees north, it stays down for approximately 134 days. But the return of light doesn't wait for sunrise. Even before the sun appears, the increasing solar radiation begins to affect the environment. The atmosphere starts to warm, ever so slightly. Snow surfaces, which have been radiating heat into space throughout the winter, begin to receive small amounts of incoming energy. By late February and early March, although the sun has not yet risen at the highest latitudes, daylight is returning rapidly to the lower Arctic regions. The change is dramatic. In Utqiagvik, Alaska, formerly known as Barrow, at 71 degrees north, The sun sets on November 18th and doesn't rise again until January 23rd. That's 6 to 7 days of polar night. But once it returns, the day length increases rapidly, gaining about 20 minutes of daylight every 3 days. This rapid increase in day length is one of the Arctic's most remarkable features. In temperate regions, day length changes gradually and steadily throughout the year. But near the poles, the change is compressed. Once the sun returns, it climbs higher in the sky very quickly, and the hours of daylight accumulate rapidly. By the spring equinox in late March, day and night are equal length everywhere on Earth, 12 hours each. But in the Arctic, this is just the midpoint. Within weeks, there will be more daylight than darkness. By late April, there will be 20 hours of daylight. And by the summer solstice in late June, the sun will not set at all. The polar night will be replaced by the midnight sun. But in these early weeks of returning light, in late February, March, and early April, the Arctic is caught between winter and spring. The temperatures are still bitterly cold. The sea ice reaches its maximum extent in March, covering the greatest area of ocean. Snow depth is at its peak, accumulated over months of winter storms. And yet, the light is returning. The sun is coming back. Life responds immediately to this returning light. Even before humans can perceive much difference, organisms tuned to subtle changes begin their preparations for spring. The ice algae beneath the sea ice, those microscopic organisms we explored in an earlier segment, are among the first to respond. As soon as light levels begin to increase, even slightly, ice algae begin to photosynthesize more actively. Their growth accelerates, starting the process that will lead to the massive bloom in April and May. Arctic foxes, which have spent the winter in their white coats, begin their molt. The white fur, so advantageous for camouflage against snow, gradually gives way to brown or gray summer fur. The change happens slowly, taking several weeks, creating a patchy, mottled appearance during the transition. Ptarmigan, Arctic birds that turned completely white in autumn, also begin to molt, their white plumage gradually being replaced by mottled brown feathers that will better match the summer tundra. Female polar bears, deep in their maternity dens, sense the returning light even through layers of snow. Cubs born in late December or early January, tiny, blind, and helpless at birth, are now growing rapidly on their mother's rich milk. By March, they weigh 10 to 15 kilograms, 20 to 30 pounds, and their eyes are open. They begin to move around the den, playing and exploring their small, dark world. The mother bear has not eaten since autumn. She has survived the entire winter on her fat reserves while producing milk for her cubs. By March, she may have lost half her body weight. But she waits, waiting for the right moment to emerge, waiting for conditions that will give her cubs the best chance of survival. That moment typically comes in late March or early April, when the light has fully returned and temperatures begin their slow rise towards spring levels. The mother bear digs through the snow, creating an opening to the outside world. She emerges first, cautiously, testing the conditions. Then the cubs follow, seeing sunlight and the outside world for the very first time. For the cubs, this is a moment of wonder and disorientation. They have known only the darkness of the den, the warmth of their mother's body, the small enclosed space. Now they are confronted with vast openness, with brilliant white snow extending to the horizon, with wind and cold and space beyond imagination. They stay close to their mother, venturing only short distances at first, gradually building confidence as they explore this new reality. The family remains near the den for several days, allowing the cubs to acclimate and gain strength before beginning the journey to the sea ice where the mother can finally hunt and eat after months of fasting. Across the Arctic, similar transitions are unfolding. Caribou, which spent the winter in the boreal forest at the southern edge of their range, begin to sense the changing light and prepare for their northern migration. Soon they will travel hundreds of kilometers back to their calving grounds on the coastal tundra. Migratory birds, which spent the winter in temperate or even tropical regions, begin their journeys north. Some will travel thousands of kilometers, tens of thousands of kilometers, to reach their Arctic breeding grounds. Arctic terns, which nest in the Arctic during summer, migrate from Antarctica, a round trip of approximately 70,000 kilometers, 44,000 miles, the longest migration of any animal on Earth. But the Arctic in March and early April is still firmly in winter's grip, despite the returning light. Air temperatures at the North Pole in March average around -32 degrees Celsius, about -26 degrees Fahrenheit. This is actually colder than the average December temperature, because the ocean and ice have continued to lose heat throughout the winter, reaching their coldest point in late winter even as day length begins to increase. The warming happens slowly. The sun, when it finally rises, is low on the horizon. Its rays strike the surface at a shallow angle, spreading their energy over a large area. Much of the incoming solar radiation is reflected by the bright white snow and ice rather than being absorbed. The albedo, the reflectivity, of fresh snow can be 90% or higher, meaning that 90% of the sun's energy bounces back into space without warming the surface. This is why Arctic spring is a prolonged transition rather than a sudden transformation. The sun must not only return, it must climb high enough in the sky to deliver meaningful energy to the surface. And the snow and ice must begin to melt, reducing the albedo and allowing more solar energy to be absorbed. The melt begins at the edges, at the margins where ice meets open water, where snow meets exposed rock. Dark surfaces absorb heat, warm up, and begin to melt the adjacent snow and ice. This creates more dark surface, which absorbs more heat, creating a self-reinforcing cycle called the ice-albedo feedback. But in early spring, this process has barely begun. The landscape is still white, still frozen, still locked in winter cold. What has changed is the light. The light has returned. And with it comes the promise of transformation. As we reach the end of our journey through the Arctic winter, as we imagine the sun finally breaking the horizon after months of absence, there is a sense of completion. We have traveled through the darkness, through the cold, through the silence. We have met the creatures that survive and thrive in conditions that seem impossible. We have seen the beauty in ice crystals and northern lights, in winds and waves, in the persistence of life in the face of extraordinary challenges. The Arctic winter is not a time of death or emptiness. It is a time of quiet endurance, of remarkable adaptations, of systems functioning in balance. It is a reminder that life finds ways to exist in every corner of our planet, that nature's creativity and resilience are boundless. And now, as the light returns, as winter slowly yields to spring, there is a sense of hope, of renewal, of the eternal cycle continuing as it has for millions of years. Let this image rest in your mind, the Arctic sun, low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ice, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold, the promise of warmth still distant but drawing closer with each passing day. Breathe deeply, slowly, let your breath match the patient rhythm of the seasons, the slow turning from darkness to light, from cold to warmth, from winter to spring. And rest, knowing that after every darkness comes light, after every winter comes spring, that the cycles continue, reliable and eternal. Sleep well.